All right, guys, here we are. Summer's here, and we've got to get prepared for season in the fall. Hopefully, that's going to happen. So, what we're going to do is do as much of our installs as we can over video, and then when we do get to the field, we'll be prepared as possible. So, hopefully, you guys are going to watch these videos. For the most part, you know all of this information. So what we're hoping to do is for the new guys coming up that you are prepared at 100% level, ready to go when we do hit the field. And for returning players, you guys are able to review this material for just kind of refreshing your memory on some things that we're going to go ahead and do since it's been a few months. So the first thing that I'm going to cover is just what we do with our gaps, how we number them, and how we letter them. That helps us prepare for the blitzes. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and just show our basic fronts, and that'll be it for today. All right, here we go. So basically, for the most part, you know this information already. We have our own way we like to number things, so I'm just going to go ahead and review that with you. So anytime we have you head up on the center, we're going to call that a 0. And then we're going to number from the center out both directions, starts new. So we're going to go a 1, which is going to be the shade of the guard. A 2 will be head up. And then a 3, which will be the outside shade here. And then we're going to have a 4, which is our inside shade of the tackle. Our 5 will be head up the tackle. Our 6 will be the outside shade of the tackle. Our 7, inside shade of the tight end. Our 8 will be head up the tight end. And our 9 will be the outside shade of the tight end. Now, going back the other way, it'll be similar. So we'll go ahead. The inside shade of the guard is a 1. Head up is 2. Outside shade is 3. And then tackle. Inside shade is a 4. Head up is a 5. Outside shade is a 6. And if there was a double tight situation, then we'd work 7, 8, 9, just like we have it on this side. So double tight would be the same. We would just look at it from this side. Now, this particular part seems pretty easy, pretty basic, but we start running our fronts and we say get into a 2, get into a 3, get into a 1. We want you guys to be able to jump into that real quick when we hit the field. So it's just important that you do memorize where you're at on the interior line. And then for our ends, you guys are going to be focusing on the outside, the tackles, and on our tight ends. Okay? All right. So now we're going to talk about lettering our gaps, which prepares for blitzes, and then other types of things we may talk about terminology-wise during the season as we prepare for our opponents. So, real simple, and this is universal across the board. I think every football team from Pop Warner on to the pros does this, but we go ahead, we have our A gap is in here, our B's, our C, and then our D. And again, in a double tight situation, our D gap would be, if there's a tight end over here, I'll just do that like that. This would end up being our D gap over here if we had a double tight situation. So that's the basics, number 1. All right, so the second thing we're going to go ahead and talk about today is just a few of our fronts and how we line up. So when we do our fronts and stunts period or any of our calls with our blitzes, you guys are prepared and moving pretty quickly because our field time this year will be shorter due to the shelter in place and social distancing. So no matter what we do, we're going to have a lot of restrictions, so we need to be mentally prepared. So this is why we're doing these videos. So basically what we're going to do is look at our first front, and that's what we call on. And that basically puts our tackles head up in this position. Now, what we have here also for you to look at is a strong right, and this would be our weak side. And the reason why this is our strong right is our eyes are facing this way, the defense is set on this side, and we just have a real simple tight end pro form with split backs, okay? So our strong right would be the defensive side, would be the strong right, because the tight end is over here. And we're facing that direction toward the quarterback, so this is how we know that we're having a defensive right strength. And our weak side is over here. In an on, this doesn't really do much to the front. We're going to be in a basic on in this situation, and then we're going to be head up. Our ends on the front, they're going to be outside shade of the last blocking lineman. So that would be either a tight end on this side or an end or tackle on this side. So basically, this is our positioning here. So an outside shade with a little bit of space to get hands, and then our end would be over here as well on an outside shade of that tight end. This would just be a basic on front. Our linebackers, for the most part, if we were in a college, we would be lining up like this. And so we would have gap responsibilities, just like that. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is when we shift all of our fronts, is that the ends don't move that much in our scheme. So what's going to happen here is our tackle, if I'm going to do a shade strong, knowing that we have a strong right situation, the front is going to move to a shade strong. And that shade will control these gaps right here. Okay, so now we have a 1 over here and we have a 3 over here. Notice we didn't move the ends. Responsibilities will stay the same. But what does change is how we line up the linebackers. So in this particular case, we have an open A gap right here. So our Mike backer will be responsible for that A gap. Our plug backer, which is on our weak side in our college look, will be responsible for this B gap. And our buck linebacker now becomes responsible for the C gap over here. All of our gaps are covered. What we like to do in this situation when we're in a shade is make sure that our D tackles, they're going to be taught this technique when we hit the field, but they're going to be engaging the shade inside or outside in this 3 of the lineman that they're covering. That way they control the A gap and also try to control, in this case, both guards, so that they can't release directly up to our linebackers so that we can make a blitz call or they can read the hole and fill as quickly as possible. Strong. The opposite of shade strong for us is very simple. So our shade weak, so if this is our strong side and this is our weak side, it shifts the 2 D tackles to the weak side. So now we're going to take this D tackle and we're going to move him into the 1 on this side. And we're going to take the weak side D tackle and we're going to move him into the 3 over here. Okay, that will shift the linebackers, as you will see. So now at this point, we're going to need to cover the Mike backer here. Let me use black to show that. So we're going to go Mike backer here, buck backer here, plug backer here. So this allows us, while we don't use this front very often, it does allow us to do some pretty intricate blitzes on the strong side over here. Plug backer will be responsible for this A gap. This D tackle will be responsible for this A gap, B gap with the Mike, and then C gap with the buck. And then the end and the tackle over here will be responsible for this B gap over here. That is shade weak. All right, leaving the strong to the right just to keep this video simple. Weak is still to the left. So what we want to do here in this situation is we're just going to be going ahead and looking at shade in and shade out. This is real basic. So the shade, again, we're going to be in a technique where we're going to be on the guards. So our D tackles are going to line themselves up in a 1 tech because it's a shade in on these guys right here. And they're going to be responsible for controlling these A gaps and controlling the guard so that they just can't easily release it up on our linebackers. The ends, their responsibilities will stay the same. They do not change unless that we tag the call with some type of stunt off the back end. But right now we're just going to focus on the interior. Based on the alignment of the D tackles, our linebackers are going to adjust. So in this particular case, our Mike linebacker will go to the strong side. Our buck linebacker will be here, and our plug linebacker will be here. Our buck linebacker is going to be responsible for C. Our Mike linebacker is going to be responsible for B. Our 2 tackles will have the A gaps. Our plug linebacker will have the B gap. And most of the time, we will be moving out of all these fronts because we are anticipating trying to keep the offensive linemen off their guard, not allowed to make clean blocks, to open up gaps for us to get into the running lanes, or if it's a pass, try to get some pressure on the quarterback. So this would be a shade in, and then, like you can imagine, shade out is going to be the opposite of that. So we're going to have in shade out will look like this, and we're in 3 techs here. Just put that in there, and we're going to shade and control gap here. And then obviously we're going to want to shift these linebackers into different gaps. A Mike backer on the strong side will have A, and our plug backer on the weak side will have A, but all of our gaps are covered with our linemen. Buck will stay the same, ends will stay the same, D, C on this side. All right, so the last thing we're going to cover is a more aggressive front, probably something that we're going to go ahead and try and get pressure on the quarterback. maybe type of blitz packages are coming off, or if we notice that we're playing a team where their linemen are slow and have a difficult time with their down step or their down block, and we know that we can get penetration on a particular play, we probably wouldn't want to do this against teams that are going to run a lot of trap, especially interior trap. But there is a place for this in our scheme. So when we call a gap call, that means we're going to abandon our control of the offensive lineman and we're going to really try to penetrate into the gaps. Careful not to get too far up the field. We still have a responsibility to make a play inside of our gap, but we definitely don't want to get caught upfield. But we also want to allow ourselves the opportunity for penetration here. Most likely in these cases, we are running a stunt with one or more linebackers in these situations. But a gap in means this. Our D tackles will line up in and in without a particular shoulder technique. In this particular case, we would have our plug backer in control of the B, our Mike backer in control of the B, and our buck backer would still be in control of the C if we were in our college front. A gap out would move these two interior linemen to an out. They would not have any shoulder control. We would not be controlling any of the shoulders. We want penetration. Again, careful not to get too far up the field and out of control, but we definitely are looking for penetration here, potentially on a passing down where we want to get to the quarterback, or we want to expose a weakness in the other team's inability to down block and get their shoulder there. This would move our linebackers more interior, so we would have our plug backer on the weak side A and our Mike backer on the strong side A. Doesn't really change the buck, and our end will stay outside, controlling the gap outside the tight end, and our other end would be out here. And so those are the gap calls that we have. This is gap out. All right, so that's it for today. What we're going to be doing is just making sure that we have these for our install periods when we do get to the field. Whenever that is, you guys are ready. This is something for you to work on slowly over the course of the summer. We'll be checking in to make sure that you are aware of all of this. And if you have any questions, we'll have probably something coming up where we can meet either by in person or in Zoom to go over some of these things.